just in case. So wonderful. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Benjamin. I use he, they pronouns. I'm calling in from Tucson, work as a restoration ecologist, but I've previously been traveling in Nepal and Ecuador, working in permaculture, syntropic agroforestry, and the like, learning a bit about this world. So I'm definitely a novice compared to everybody else here, but that experience informed an interest in connecting people working in this field of food systems change, regenerative agriculture, indigenous agriculture, permaculture, all the different language people use to describe this work they're doing to shift our food systems back on the path towards healing ourselves, our communities, and our environment of which we are a part. And yesterday we had a lovely keynote from Joshua Hughes and Bamariki Bisimwa Usabe, and talking about their work in refugee-led permaculture for Bamariki and long-term community-based agroforestry for Joshua. We're lucky to have Joshua here also on the panel. So he might be a familiar face for all of you. And this general food summit is meant to address that shift to a more healing food system, in addition to specifically connecting the different steps in the food system itself, from soil care, land stewardship, food production, cooperative management, market creation, market access, funding, all of that, in addition to connecting people who are working in this around the world. Obviously, bioregional collaboration around wherever one person is working in one region is incredibly helpful to deal with the particular social, political, ecological, soil-based issues that can arise. And it's also can be very helpful to be able to see people who are struggling in similar and also triumphing in similar spaces from around the world. That's the goal of this summit. So here we have people who are working in indigenous knowledge systems, in land stewardship, in soil care, in equitable fundraising, in cooperatively managed long-term agroforestry projects, in urban legislative change for agroecological products, in permaculture education, and so much more. So I will hand it off now to the panelists to share, start us off, their name, the pronouns that they'd like to, and then also a little bit about their regeneration origin stories. We'll be having 30 minutes of Q&A, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A from all of you. You can start sharing your questions whenever you'd like to, and we'll be recording them as we go. And then we'll have three 15-minute breakout rooms for you to spend a little bit more time talking with a few clusters of our panelists. So if you have any stories you want to share, any questions that come up that you want to wait until then for, by all means, they're really excited to talk with you in those smaller spaces as well. We'll start off, name, pronouns if you'd like to, and what is your regeneration origin story? So yeah, so panelists, welcome to unmute yourselves, and maybe we can start off with Ñawi.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Ñawi Flores. My pronouns are he, they. My regeneration starts from this silo of working with minority and underrepresented communities. I work primarily to bridge knowledge systems between indigenous knowledge systems and Western scientific knowledge to regenerate a more resilient ecosystem or resilient agroecosystem.
Do you want to share maybe a little bit about how you got into this work, or what sort of means to you?
I actually, surprisingly enough, I got into this work not because I grew up inside the rainforest or in the Andes. I get back into this work because I went to Israel and the USA to get an education in higher education in geology and environmental science, and I learned a lot of what we are doing to really extract minerals to create these technologies that we are very fascinating and enjoying right now. But we are constantly creating these small silver bullet solutions and silos. So that was a moment that I thought back into my own culture, into how we we connect with other communities, but also we connect with the land to really care for each other, and not just living in strategical niches that we are so overprotected of those conditions. So that was my introduction back into regeneration.
Anyone who'd like to can go next on there.
I'll jump in. My name is Jenny Brandt. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm based in Chetumal in the state of Quintana Roo in Mexico. And I have a history of working with nonprofit organizations in the US that work with Latino populations. And on intersecting issues like land conservation. I did that in DC and in Mexico, and now I'm taking on philanthropy to dismantle its reliance on colonialism, racism, and exploitation.
Danny, you will have to tell your story on how did you reach this place, because people are interested.
I will leave that as a cliffhanger to get folks interested in staying on.
Okay, we'll be waiting.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll follow Jenny and until she decides to tell a bit of her story after. And my name is Fabrizio. I work for Instituto Regenera. We now work with specifically barriers for agroecology retail and agroecology production scaling up. So we work mainly with groups that are trying to retail agroecology products in 2 areas in the city of Belém do Pará, which is one of the biggest Amazonian capitals, and in the region between São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, both in Brazil. So we are talking about some of the most dense areas in Brazil and a dense area inside the Amazon. I must remind all the time that the Amazon has 30 million people living inside it. So we do have big cities. We do have an urban Amazon too. And this metropolitan region is about 2.7 million people. That gets 80% of its food from other states or other countries even. So that makes no sense at all because you can produce your food in there. And I have been working with that since 2020 with Instituto Regenera, and working with food retail since 2017, where we started a cooperative for agroecology retail here in the city of São Paulo. My history starts with a bike trip from 2012 and 2013, when I took some time off and I could set some of the ideas more clear on where to put my energy on. I was talking to Jenny today in the morning that it all has to do with consequence somehow. The idea of consequence is very interesting for me to understand it, because we normally work without really connecting ourselves to the consequences of our work, since normally money can pay for whatever we need. And after the bike trip, I really felt like just searching for types of jobs and projects and so on that are consequent to what I wanted to do with my workforce or with my existence somehow. And it started with urban issues, normally connected to gentrification. But as in the bike trip, I was willing to resell food using bike as a transportation. I connected myself to some of the groups producing food here in my city. And in 2017, there came this possibility to take part in a cooperative that was shaping by that moment. So that was when I started. And then after 3 years working with retail, I noticed that there were so many other barriers for producers, indigenous people, traditional population here in Brazil to reach the city. So we forged the Instituto Regenera as a nonprofit that works with these barriers. So yeah, I think that's it for now, and I'm passing to Joshua so we can keep on going.
Hi, I'm Joshua Hughes. I live in Costa Rica in the Pacific Slopes in the region called the Puriscal region, an area that was very much deforested 70 years ago. It was primary rainforest until then. And it's now in like the throes of kind of being eroded away. And cattle and palm oil have kind of come in to put the kind of final touch on this area. So I moved here to help with forestry. I moved here to help and learn how to find a way into to rebuild and have a different relationship with the forest, not just to create like national parks, but how are we going to get how is humanity going to get engaged again with forest as a part of our culture? I come from Oregon, and I grew up in an area that I thought of as very much forests, and I became highly motivated as an activist, I would say, when I went back to the places that I cherished as forest and found out they were just tree farms for some big companies, and they were clear cut. And as I got a little older and started getting perspective on my region and my bioregion, I saw how that was everywhere around me. So I was very offended by the places I loved being destroyed. I lived near the redwoods as a child, and the redwoods motivated me into long-term romance with forest and trees. I come from the recycling business. I grew up in a wrecking yard, auto salvage, and what people think of as garbage tend to has a lot left life in it still. And so I don't like I never liked watching things that were still worthy of use, even called garbage. And I don't know where garbage goes on this little planet floating around the sun. It seems like we're just sitting on our own garbage or having it sit on us. So I was highly motivated because I really wanted to make sure that we upcycled things, and that started to include the pieces of land around the world that were considered like sacrificed. So I moved to an area of Costa Rica that had kind of been left behind, and that was really economically depressed, and felt like my enthusiasm, my organizing skills, and my ability to kind of see a future that's not there, that smarter people than me have called a sublime madness. I might have a sublime madness about the way I see the world. So I'm here to organize people, to help remind people that come from privileged societies, privileged places in this world, that there are very direct ways that we can fix this planet, and that we can do it from communities out, not just bringing ideas and shoving them onto people. But I'm here to figure out how to work with people. And I'm really enjoying this panel discussion already, and finding more people in the world that do this together, so I don't feel alone anymore in my little spot in the jungle. So thank you all, and looking forward to this talk.
Sorry. I'm putting in people's names and project links just in the chat, so you can also check those out. But yes, Robert.
Yes, please. Thank you a lot, Benjamin, and everyone, even to my fellow panelists. What I will say that I'm Robert Iñan from Uganda, and my story in land regeneration started since childhood, because being someone who was raised and born in the war torn region of northern Uganda back then. And then later on, being raised up by a single widow woman also shaped me a lot into this work, because all our entire family have lived to know that it's only through farming that we can be able to sustain the family. And also it's only through farming that we can be able to raise up our great children. And also through my life experience of being reliant on the World Food Program supply back then also taught us a lot that is not a sustainable way of living. And then we also have to get back onto the land. We have to grow our own food, or which later on, it also came up with some other negative impact onto the environment. And that's why I started my journey of land restoration, because most cases people cut down trees to clear up lands so that they can be able to grow in monocrop system. But then later on, I realized that in the long run, we are only depleting in our soil and the environment. So most of these impact, they are more into making these smallholders farmers more vulnerable and losing in their household incomes, and also a bit of livelihood, because also they are impact on tree burning, which is not a good thing to both the human life and also the environment. And also the district where I come from, being close to the National Game Park, that's Madison National Game Park. Also, we had an issues with animal always coming out of the National Game Park and close to the local community area, district food crops. And it also brought me into the idea that I really need to co-work with this local community and also the game rangers so we can find in the alternative way that we can confine those animals to one place that will not be able to come and displace this local community nearby. But then also, my personal life and the career life into a sustainable agriculture and extension is one of the key things that really helped me a lot in this journey. Where in 2018, I co-founded the Regions Ops Initiative. Today that we live to train and empower the local farming community with the regenerative farming practice and on. Big reason being that we really believe that when we empower this local community with the on knowledge, they'll be able to adapt and then make it into their own family. Yes, like one of my colleagues mentioned that all these things we are doing because we want to value in the local knowledge. We don't want to bring anything out of our office or out of our side, but then we want to empower these local people with the knowledge that they do have so that they can be able to stand on their own in this work of land restoration. So that's basically also what we are trying to do right here in the northern Uganda. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate this opportunity. I look forward more. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing your stories. I think that one of the things that I was really hearing was that most of you had a kind of like a moment or an experience that caused you to shift into this work. I think that it's interesting that there are, and it seems that is a common story more and more and more. There are people who are actively engaged in this from birth, and a lot of us have the opportunity and the fortune to encounter people who are already on these paths that then can help us understand more about them. I guess I'm going to ask maybe 2 more questions before we open it up to the full group. I think these are also questions that I would love to hear, honestly, all your perspectives on. I think all of you are coming at this again from different levels of food systems and ones that people might not see as central, but without which our movement is likely not as strong as it could be, I guess, to put it that way. So I'm curious, in your areas of focus right now, whether it's soils, fundraising, urban legislative change, education, long-term management, cooperative management, and stewardship, if you feel like there is one main thing that you notice people miss, people don't understand, people misunderstand about what you've been dedicating yourself to right now. Yeah, and that'll open to any and all of you.
I think that many people think that like forestry work is going to take forever. I think that there's an idea that planting trees is something that's very slow. I moved to a spot where we get like 8 meters of rain a year. I have a light in my eyes and smile on my face because I've seen what happens in some places like here in Costa Rica in the tropics where trees grow extremely quickly. So I'm seeing results much faster than I ever thought I would. And it just, for myself, it's been a highly motivating thing. It keeps me going that almost everything we try here just kind of explodes out of the ground. And it took some work. It took some hard work. We're sweaty. We're running through the mountains and, cutting grass back and stuff. But I think the misunderstood thing is that this is going to take a long time, and that our effects maybe have to be like global to make a difference. But in my little bioregion, soil is back in short order. Creeks flow year round that used to dry up, and there's shade for birds and animals that are returning much quicker than I ever thought they would. So I think we should be excited to share with people, and more people should understand this stuff can happen quickly, have short-term rewards, and then start having these positive feedback loops that are going to help us do this. This doesn't have to be some $50 trillion investment, as I've heard like naysayers say, to get things going. We're figuring out that along the way we start getting benefits very quickly, and I think we should expect that and not expect everything to be so global. The local feeling really changed quickly.
Or maybe we can, always recommending that I just call people. So maybe Can go with Jenny next.
Did you say my name, Ben? Just to check.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, great. I think that something that people miss is just the interconnectedness of all these issues. Like when I think about regenerative agriculture and where we've come, like right now we have this very industrial-based agriculture that relies on petrochemicals as fertilizers, that is employing like migrant labor from Latin America and the US, that is, separating families. The petrochemical products are being generated in like Black communities in the US. So I think what people are kind of missing is that this deeply ingrained system of relying on petrochemicals is affecting us all in this global network, that sometimes it's hard to see the connections, of like the plastic that you're drinking out of is all connected. And by making the shift to regenerative agriculture, we can actually start rooting out this petrochemical kind of villain that is at the root of so many different issues that are causing harm to the planet and to the people.
Jenny, next we can go for Fabricio.
I was just writing directly to you, Benjamin. Can I share my screen for 2 minutes for this answer?
Yeah, of course. I think that you're already you're already co-host, so you're more than welcome to.
Okay, so I'm sharing. If you have difficulties, just let me know, okay, Benjamin? It should be my Google Maps screen here. This little green dot in here is my it's a place where I am right now, here in São Paulo. So I'm zooming out just to check like this very green dense area of São Paulo, the state where I am. I'm not going to the country, but I'm going to the state level, for us to see a small detail that calls for what we are talking about when we say ancestral knowledge. So it is probably hard for you guys to see, but there is the line of the state in here, the state of São Paulo. But it's probably viewable that we have a lighter green area. So most of the state is a lighter green area. And we have a dark green area in here, which is, this is the remainings of the tropical forest we used to have in here. And this is commodity producing in the area of São Paulo. So if you see even the color from the sky, from the space, you can see it's clearly different. And it's because these people in here produce food keeping the forest. And they are here for not that much. I mean, they are here for only three or four centuries, but they have learned with indigenous people in here what to do to keep the forests and produce food. They are Black communities. So when I talk about agroecology and agroecology production, I'm talking about experiences such as this one, which is clearly keeping the forest standing and producing food all at once. So this is the type of thing that people normally don't take that much attention to. When we are talking about ancestral knowledge, they are there doing that for hundreds of centuries, and they are keeping the forests. And we don't see this technology, as a social technology, as an ancestral technology. So this is something that I wanted to remind.
It's been, as like a layperson, I feel like that reimagining what technology means, it's been an incredibly enlightening thing. So thank you for sharing on that. We could go to Ñawi next, maybe want to share a little bit like in stewardship or soil science or indigenous knowledge systems, what you feel people often miss.
It's kind of hard not to appreciate what Fabricio shared as a native people of Abya Yala, which is South America, the landmass of South America. It's kind of hard not to see these images and not to think about how little people misunderstand indigenous intellectual property. And when I think about land stewardship it goes back to that component. Because right now, one thing that we are missing in here, we are definitely missing is our America's social cultural shared history. That's what we're missing here. Because in here, where we are discussing is what was before 1491, or what was before 1490. What was that technology? That's where when we say traditional knowledge, that's where we're talking about. And then every time a anthropologist and our archaeologists and our soil scientists and a land manager and all of them, they start talking about indigenous knowledge, what they're talking about is after that moment, after that period of time, how we have extracted pieces of the knowledge. When I was really thinking about what was the intellectual property of those communities. And we have changed that because otherwise we will have to recognize the knowledge. We have changed that. We call it this, we call it the Green Revolution. We call it the agriculture. We call it agronomy. We call it agroforestry. We call it regenerative agriculture, organic agriculture, sustainable agriculture. You name it. We keep changing the names because it's easy to sell it. It's easy to bring that bump into the marketplace. But what if this idea that missing the point, it goes back to thinking about land stewardship, how we acknowledge that there was knowledge before it was introduced. What if it is a merger of these two things as we are looking into the future, as we are thinking about land stewardship? That's the piece that we are forgetting a little bit.
Very much like looking into the future as we look into the past as well. Thank you for sharing. And Robert, yeah, to finish us off for this.
Thank you. On my side, basically, I think that what real people miss is the economic sustainability, because, you know, through digital generative work, it means that we are reducing on our input costs, and then meanwhile, we are maximizing our profit. So we are not just maximizing profit as in terms of monetary way, but also in terms of building up our soul system. So that's basically what most of the people miss. And as one of my colleagues highlighted that, with the use of synthetic fertilizers, we are just making things more worse and worse and worse. So basically, what I really know that when these local farmers, they're able to use the local available material in their food production, as one of my colleagues mentioned that way before industrial revolution, how were these people living? So those are the kind of things we have to look into.
Hey, I'd really like to say I love what you said a minute ago.
Which are now people
and
missing into this.
Oh, sorry, who cut out?
Yeah, I think I'm there. Sorry, there was a call coming.
I love what you said a second ago, Fabricio and Ñawi, about other technologies. We tend to just think about high tech, but there are several levels of technology: local technology, human technology, low technology, nature technology. And I think we should get people more excited about that, because we tend to lean just towards high tech, which is where only a few people get to innovate. But humans as a whole, I think, innovated the best when we were all engaging in food production, because we all had to make our new tools all the time. We had to adjust. And one thing about ancient technologies, which I really lean in hard in Costa Rica, on community-based forestry and the human technology and the nature technology here that we should lean on to get back to balance, back to that 1491 mentality, maybe. There's a big gap in that narrative, though, where the positive feedback loops that nature provided for us forever were cut down and eliminated. So we're not just going to have to come to how we do this. We're going to need to build back enough of nature that nature has these positive feedback loops so that we can all eat and thrive with it again. So local tech, high tech, community technology. So these decisions are made from local areas. I really love to speak more on technology with everyone in the future, because it can be just as exciting getting into nature tech as high tech, or more exciting. and frankly, maybe way more complex, way more to learn. So I love it when young minds come to this game that don't even care about food, but engineers and other people that kind of start recognizing the depth of these positive feedback loops that we need to tend to, so that we don't have to keep making new technologies. Nature can do a lot of this with us and for us.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Joshua, and everyone else. This kind of is going right into another question that Michaela was also asking around kind of like the pressures that kind of like force us towards extractive organizational models, extractive food production models. And I was curious if maybe you could speak to a little bit of those pressures. Even within, we see a lot of greenwashing, we see a lot of kind of ways to reform a system that is already broken without getting at the root of what is damaging us. You know, you'll have a model of a very successful business in permaculture, but has the same kind of like top-down management framework. Maybe the way that it gets money is from people who are asking them to align with kind of these very profitable extractive processes around maybe how they treat soil. We see organic where they'll have monocrops of tomatoes at a smaller scale, and then wonder why it's so expensive to manage it with natural pesticides, hands-on farming, instead of, you know, rethinking the entire paradigm and only growing tomatoes at the right time alongside the consortium of plants that grow best with it, right? All of these plants were, I mean, almost all the plants we use right now originated in indigenous communities. And that's one of the questions we see a lot. So I'm curious, maybe if you want to speak specifically in terms of like organizational management, in terms of how people like fundraise. I would love to hear a little bit about how in your work, you see those pressures pushing people towards kind of like more extractive models of funding, which seems to be the root of a lot of it. And also two, extractive or dangerous models of organizational management. I'm thinking, I guess, specifically, Jenny, and the work that you're doing around community-centric fundraising, and Joshua around cooperative land management. But I obviously would love to hear from a couple other people as well. And after this, we will switch to full Q&A.
Okay, I feel like that was a setup. So one of the things that community-centric fundraising has done is put out 10 different principles. And I'll point out number 10 here, where we're talking about, we recognize that healing and liberation requires a commitment to economic justice. I mean, I'm hoping this doesn't come off the wrong way, but I think, you know, capitalism is really a structure that has made it so that everyone's trying to, you know, produce cost at the lowest possible, you know, denominator. And I think Fabricio said something when we talked this morning that is really about rebuilding communities, and really like the goals should shift away from just making money and rather about, you know, healing, repairing community, our relationships with the earth. And so I think that essentially that's what we're all getting at. But yeah, I'll leave it there.
I think that in my world, I've had to really shift the way I think about funding things into this very long term. It's like we need to people, especially people that I work with. I tend to work with people from the lower middle classes, quote unquote. And how do we fund this? Like it's we need a tax base to fund these things, but we're all trying to do it with our businesses. Building back the commons as an individual is nearly impossible. I don't have billions of dollars, and it wouldn't even be the commons if I did it myself. So like doing this with your community and growing out from your community, and then the people that have the means to finance this, I speak to people on deep levels of like, let's collaborate on building those commons back. And then I expect very little from each person. We've been doing this with investors that spend a few $1,000s or just a few months or years of their life participating. And that tends to create a larger buy-in. I have like 75 people that own 3 projects together here in my village. So in radical ownership, I think we can start making decisions as a group instead of me having to like say, hey, I'm going to make y'all money and I'm going to show up every day and make sure that yours comes off the top. There is no top until there's a very well-established foundation. And it's a bummer to be small businesses and little organizations that we have to take on this rebuilding of the commons to even get to zero. So that is very interesting to find the types of investors that will do that. And I don't even know if the word's investors, because what you just said, Jenny, capitalism, capital is not my ism and never will be. In fact, even if I get a little cash, that's not capital. Capital is like stagnant power from the past that gets to project itself onto the current, the now, and to the future. So I'm really working to get away from that way of thinking at all, much like it sounds many of you are, that capital is not my ism. I like entrepreneurism. I like small businessism. I like us coming together and doing collaboratives and cooperatives. And the decisions we need to make are going to be how we think about this differently. So, because if we put profits first, we'll never get the foundation built. At least we won't with my, $1,000 at a time building this in the jungle with my community. So we need the larger, the governments of the world to kick in a little bit and start financing this stuff so that each one of our businesses don't run into the same problem. How do we get to zero to even start producing or even start getting into whatever people call profitable? And that pressure put on regenerative ag, you're basically telling me to put the pressure on the forests again and on the forest people in my community, which has all sorts of downstream issues and upstream issues, as Jenny said.
Wonderful. Thank you both. I kind of want to tap in another question that was coming off of this from, I want to say your name right, from Nakawoki. Asking, in Uganda, most farmers are being advised to run away from indigenous farming practices, which is very sad. But how can we support rural farmers to embrace and mix and match? I think that's a really good point, because a lot of the time, at least there are certain ways that in this kind of small, we don't have access to the same amount of land as we have had in the past due to kind of the human population size and also in general of other factors, including human consumption. But I'm curious, in your experiences, maybe we can even start with Robert from your experience in Uganda as well, about why people are being forced to the pressures away from these ancestral practices and how to support them in, again, I like how you put it, mixing and matching to see what works best. This requires a lot of initial investment of money, oftentimes, sometimes equipment, and can make it challenging. That can be a big barrier. So yeah, maybe Robert, if you want to start, we can get one more person, and then we're going to sadly shift into breakout sessions for you to ask any more questions that come up.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Basically, this indigenous knowledge in farming practice has been always termed as the most inferior practice ever by both the government and also the petrochemical industry. So when you look into a region like in northern region where I come from, you find that most of the food they are being produced without much use of the chemicals. But then also you realize that now the government's coming out with some other partners, what they call their partners, those chemical industry. So they are trying to discuss the local farming community to move away from this kind of practice because they look at this as something that is yielding very low. And yet, if you look into those seeds that they come up with, or those other products that they come up with, and if you give the correct attention, for instance, if you give correct attention to those improved seeds, you realize that you still, the local seed and those hybrid seeds, you realize that the local seed will still give the same yield as per the hybrid seeds, as long as you're given the required attention. With the local community, they already have in those knowledge. For instance, they could, like even the tree that I'm sitting right under it right now, this tree also have a potential that you can use it, you can just mix the leaf and then you use it as a pesticide in your own garden instead of going to agro-dealer shop to buy chemicals import. And then also our elders, our great-grandparents, they had in the knowledge and the skill of preserving the local seed for themselves. And then also today was really shocking to learn that according to the Daily Monitor publication, one of the Uganda leading newspaper here, to publish that Uganda is set to destroy over 1,700 tons of maize just because of the aflatoxin level B failures. So you realize that this thing is really a serious threat to the local farming community. Is also a serious threat to the farmers, to the small farmer incomes, because now government tend to ignore what this local community they used to do those days, because in those days, all those family, they used to have a local granary where they used to store and their farm produce safely and was really free from all pests. But then because of those improved seeds also, you realize they are too prone to the pests. We all know that when something being introduced new into a particular area, it will mean that they are not well compatible to the local situation in the place. So this is the kind of challenge that we are now facing. But still, we are trying our best so that we can overcome such challenge by empowering these local farmers so that we can bring back all those glories that they used to have. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of that sounds like you're saying specifically supporting them through education, which is kind of like what you're doing. Robert works a lot with schools, specifically working with students in schools in permaculture education, and then also employment. Those are the main things that I was hearing. Maybe we can get one other person to, if they want to add on to that, and then we can shift. I guess, or actually, it'd be interesting. I think it'd be, yeah, maybe from Fabricio and Ñawi, just because we didn't hear from you in the last question, whether one of you want to kind of like add on around what keeps people away from indigenous or ancestral farming practices, and what you've seen helps support them in, or support just communities in general in adopting these adopting their version of these practices.
One thing I would state is that what Robert described is not a new process, unfortunately. Something that happened a hell of a lot here in South America. So it's a very known process of colonization, neo-colonization, on terms of the seeds that you allow people to use and so on. One thing I would add to the previous question is that working with retail, one of the myths that comes along all the time is about the choice. You know, it's like if people make different choices, they can support. They definitely can support. That is very important. But the main change is about the infrastructure that allows the choice, which means the conditions of possibility of that choice. So when you reach any place for you to eat, you know, you want to buy in your grocery stores, in your chains of supermarkets, or even if you go to the local markets and so on, most of it is well defined before what you're going to find in there. What can you access when you go to these places? By the cities that I work with here in the Amazon, Belém specifically gets more than 80% of food from other states, which means that is not being produced in the Amazon. It's not respecting their food sovereignty. It's all the bad, the worst example that we can have. So we have to shift a little bit on this subject of choice, like, and trying to search ways politically, socially, in our activisms, in our everyday life, to create more choices, because otherwise we will not have choices. You know, it's like we are going to the places. If we search what is being offered, it's very, very limited already. It's not connected to our biomes. It's not connected to what we should be eating. So somehow there is a much greater work to be done. There was a question connected to that. How can we face these people? I mean, what I see is that most of the actors that drove the design of this process of, you know, how food is produced and how it reaches the cities and so on, these are not going to be our allies, unfortunately. So we will have to find our own paths, to like creating our own cooperative of producers, our own cooperative of people responsible for delivering this food in cities, and be more careful about that, because as far as we can see, at least from here in Brazil, is that we don't have allies in these areas. Although some of them have ESG reports, it's really definitely not enough.
Yeah, what I'm hearing a lot is also specifically like the power of the illusion of choice. You go somewhere into a traditional supermarket, and you have all these brands, you have all these different types of tomatoes, you have all these different types of onions or whatever, but they're all, in terms of how they're impacting their environment, in terms of how they're impacting the workers that are tasked with caring for them, harvesting them, they're all the same. Yeah, I guess before we close, Ñawi, do you want to add on to that at all?
I
What are also
will,
something about, like the experience in the Andes where, yeah. Anyways,
it's a global experience. It's not isolated to the Andes. These issues. It's not isolated to Africa. It's a global indigenous experience that this is going through, and it has this idea of pressuring. Of every time that we come up with a new terminology for agriculture, we pressure in the idea of scaling it. It has to scale. It has to make profit, and that has put it into the mindset of indigenous farmers or local farmers. They have been grained when the push for scaling it. If it scales, it's successful. If it doesn't scale, it's not an innovative approach. So every model that we have started with permaculture. It had the same problem. Agroecology has the same problem. Agroforestry has the same problem. Now regenerative agriculture has become both. It has become a movement and a greenwash. Has become both at this point. In the Andes, the way that we are approaching this to break this nonsense of scaling and being pushed around actually is about we need to lead our own indigenous-led research design. That's what we need to do. There is a lot of knowledge out there telling us that our knowledge system is less valuable than Western knowledge system. But that's because we don't have enough research that is led by indigenous people. There is not a lot of research papers out there that can back our system. We need to start doing that. And that's what we're doing in Andes. We are leading our own way of designing our research, when our own ways of thinking. This is the goals that we want to meet with this research. This is where the paradigm shift that we want to do. And we are not just leading in the soil health management systems. We are also leading into the conversation that what it will take us now to really move into the next era of crop domestication. For that, we need to do the research. Otherwise, we will be, again, governed and driven by big corporations that now they are patenting seeds. Now they own a genome patent in the seeds that we eat. But we need to go back and work together with the basis, with the people that has done this work. So in pushing, in trying to prevent how Western ideologies of this is the best way to do it, to counteract, we also need to build knowledge that speaks in the language that they understand. And that is leading research by indigenous people, leading regenerative business models through the communities. I agree with Fabricio. Nobody will give us something to grab on. But it never has happened. In the history of the global society, it never has been given to minority and underserved communities. It never has happened. We had to go and grab it. Indigenous people in the global south has to go and paralyze entire countries to say we need rights for nature. We had to do it. Nobody has given a hand over. We, the people, has a standard. We find the path. So this is the same thing right now. We will have a way to lead this. And then somebody will tweet about it and it will say, bravo. So that's my contribution on that. You know, how much do we care about this? Maybe it's 10 characters tweet. Maybe it's actually doing something that it really creates allianship. That's what we are.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that one of the movements that is really inspiring is the rights of nature in Ecuador. Ecuador is the first nation in the world to enshrine the rights of nature in its constitution, which was directly coming from the solidarity movements of the groups of indigenous peoples in Ecuador. So yeah, we're gonna transition now to doing our clusters. So we're gonna have 3 around 15-minute breakout sessions. You can stay in one cluster or you can move between them, but I will let you know basically when there's 5 minutes and when it's time to switch. Our clusters are land stewardship versus management with Ñawi. So you can learn more, you can ask more about indigenous knowledge systems, around what those movements look like, around soil health, around also land stewardship specifically, obviously. Our second cluster is community and education with Robert and Joshua. Joshua coming from the perspective of being a part of this incredible cooperative that's reverse brain drain in this region of Costa Rica, in Puriscal. and Robert coming at it from the perspective of a permaculture educator working with schools in northern Uganda. And then our third cluster is markets and equitable fundraising with Fabricio and Jenny. Jenny coming at it, as she mentioned, from perspective working with, well, first off, a lot of different movements in Mexico, also lobbying in DC, or a lot of work in DC as well. And specifically right now with community-centric fundraising, around how to stay true to morals, specifically for BIPOC fundraisers. And obviously Fabricio from this view of markets and cities in Sao Paulo and Belém as agroecological hubs. So I'm going to make the breakout rooms. I'm going to give our panelists a little bit of time to get them situated. If y'all want to have maybe like a 3-minute little water break while that happens, and then I will let you know. You can say maybe, yeah, let's say in 3 minutes, I'll send you all into the breakout rooms.